I just want to introduce myself. I'm Stacey Penna. I'm the NVivo Community Director with QSR, and very excited to have on today Dr. Deborah Lupin, who is going to talk to us about how to do research in this very trying time. And we appreciate everyone joining us when we know there's a lot going on in everyone's life. So, and just also to let you know, my screen is that we want to make sure you can have this conversation during this, but also after the webinar today. So we have a hashtag NVivo chat. So if you go there on Twitter, you can type in questions there and talk amongst each other, and then also with Deborah and us later. So with that, I'm going to switch screens and go to Deborah's PowerPoint. It will let me because all this is happening. Okay, can you see the screen, Deborah?
Yes, I can, Stacey.
Sorry, it just I didn't realize this was going to happen with. All right. Do you want to start, Deborah? Can you see it? Okay, I'm going to try to make it once it allows me larger. So if you want to go ahead, we'll have people stop trying in a while. Okay. Slideshow.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, why don't you take it away, Deborah?
Sure, so I'll just go ahead and start. Okay, great. Oh, there we go. It's full screen on my computer. So thanks very much, Stacey. So many people listening in, I understand there might be a bit of a time lag. I'm getting one a bit, and I'm also getting pretty crackly sound from Stacey's in the US and I'm in Australia. So anyway, we'll press ahead, and we do have the slides, and also there'll be a link that people will be able to click on as a resource later. So what I want to talk about today is a crowdsourced Google Docs document that I put together and initiated. And I'm just going to, I don't have many slides, but what the slides will be showing is very kind of broad notes on what the Google Doc has become. I actually, just to give the backstory, I started the Google Doc because I myself, as someone who does a lot of ethnographic in-person research, and I'm right in the middle of a project which involved visiting people in their homes in Sydney, Australia, and videoing them as they did a home tour for us. And we were interested in the digital devices that they and their family members were using in their home settings. And so we basically were using a video camera to walk around their house with them, chatting as we were going, and taking a video of the devices that they were pointing to and talking about. And it actually was quite interesting because we were, just from the very first home visit, there were really interesting things that were coming out that we could physically see because we were there in the homes with the people. And one was, for example, someone was talking about their digital home assistant that they'd forgotten that they actually owned because it was never used. It was sitting sort of dusty and unloved behind their smart television. And we suddenly said, oh, right, yes, we've got this, this home assistant. Oh, here it is, but no one ever uses it, but it is plugged in. So they're the kind of really interesting and situated insights that, of course, you get when you're doing that sort of very detailed fieldwork, that ethnographic type fieldwork. So, of course, now that we're in the COVID world, that was in the pre-COVID world, we're now in the post-COVID world, and everything has changed in every way, really, for everyone across the world. So I, as well as many, many other people, had to suddenly think to myself, okay, we now cannot physically go to our participants' homes. We have to think of how else we can do this field work. We want to continue with the field work. We're on pause for now because we don't want to be encroaching on people's lives right now. But once we feel that we're ready to start talking to our participants and they're ready, we do want to continue on with our project. So that's actually when I initiated the Google Doc, doing fieldwork in the pandemic, it's called. I made it open to everyone to contribute. I sort of kicked it off, listed a few methods that I could think of or that I have already been used in the past, and basically publicised it widely. I'm lucky that I have a lot of followers on Twitter, so I was able to use Twitter in particular as a way to get the news out there, saying, inviting people to contribute to the document. And they did, which was fantastic. There was a lot of interest, and now I think it's over 30 pages long of really interesting methods that people have suggested that they've had experience with. So it has developed into a really rich document. So what I'd like to do today is, well, in the part of this webinar when I'm talking, I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of what's in the document, and then at the end I'm going to do what I'm calling a guided tour of the document, and go through some of the methods that are listed there. Next slide please, Stacey.
Deborah, do you
So
want to
this is
describe
the problem that I was facing, my research team was
It's
facing,
crackly, but there's also a little feedback. So we just wouldn't want to try it.
Sure, I've just done that. Let me know if it's better once I start again. So yes, the problem, you plan to conduct fieldwork using traditional face-to-face methods, then COVID-19 erupted, now what? So that has been the problem that we're all facing, and I do know from some of the feedback that I've been getting on Twitter and some of the emails that people have been sending me that it's also a problem, of course, for lecturers who are going on to online teaching, and they're teaching research methods, and they're having to be faced with this problem of how to teach their students about methods and how their students can do little field work, examples to learn the methods. Also, of course, how many research students are now having to be faced with the conundrum of what they're going to do with their theses. Next slide, please. So in the Google document, there are two main methods that have been suggested. So I kicked off the document with a little preamble saying, we're all now having to work out what to do when we can't actually physically go and visit people and talk to them face to face. And that is the types of methods that were initially listed, and that I initially listed, but others initially put down in the document. So traditionally face to face, transforming into so-called distance methods. So that was the key problem that I began the document with. But it's also interesting, and it's great as well to see that some people have also added content in the document about born digital content, or these were already distance methods that involved using data that were generated online by just people's everyday interactions on social media or discussion forums or comments to news articles and so on. There's so many different social media content curation sites, YouTube and so on, that have become very rich repositories of information about people's everyday lives. So those are the two main different kinds of approaches. Either you can, when you're thinking through the kind of research you are doing that you need to modify, or what you would like to talk to your students about, then those are the two main. It's transforming face-to-face into distance approaches, and it's maybe considering whether you'd like to try using content that's already been generated in online media. Next slide, please. I'd really like to emphasize too that it's not all about the digital. And this could be a moment where, as social researchers, we can start to actually think about analogue methods. Now, I've had some feedback from people saying, I'm working with older people who may not be comfortable with using digital technologies in talking to me or generating content for my research, for example. There may be problems with people who lack reliable access to Wi-Fi or even may not even really own digital computing technologies that they have at home. So one thing that I've really been working on in the last year or so in the Vitalities Lab, which is a research team I have at my university, University of New South Wales, is doing very hands-on, basically pen and paper creative research methods. And we've run little workshops and there's been a lot of interest in them, and we've been experimenting with those methods as a group together, and it's been a lot of fun. And they might include what I've written here is handwritten creative responses. So we've been working with story completion, with creative prompts, asking people to respond to creative writing prompts. We could go back to asking people to write paper diaries rather than do online diaries. We can ask them to do drawings. We can ask them to do mapping exercises using pen and paper. We actually, in the ethnographic work I was talking about where we did home visits, we did actually have a mapping process there using pen and paper as well, when we asked people to actually sit down and draw a little kind of very rough map of the digital devices in their homes, for example. And we used that as one of our research artefacts, as well as the video of them doing the walk around their houses. Collages. We've also experimented with zine making in our lab, which is a similar approach to collages, but it is making your own handmade zines, which includes using images that you might have taken from magazines, for example, and recombining them in creative ways, but also adding words and writing, creative writing to them. That's been a lot of fun. You can actually go back to getting people to write letters. And you can use the cultural probes idea, which is an idea involving leaving little, again, often little cards that people write on with inspiration prompts on them that gets people thinking about your research topics. And as I've said there at the bottom of the slide, you can send and return these artefacts by snail mail. Use the old mail system. Or you could use email if people are happy to use email. They could take photos of these artefacts and send you photos of them. And then you can then follow up with a phone or an online discussion. So I'd really like to emphasise that it's, yes, there's a lot of really interesting digitised ways that we can do distance fieldwork, but there's also these older style ways that can often be really engaging for participants, and we have certainly found that when we've been experimenting with these methods, that people often find it really creative and really enjoy doing these kinds of activities rather than necessarily just being fine with a whole lot of questions as in a traditional face-to-face interview or even online interview context. Next slide, please. Now, of course, the ethical implications are incredibly important to consider when we're all rethinking what research we are doing. And again, I've had some feedback from people who have raised issues around if you're dealing with very sensitive personal topics, and people are now often, well, they are in many countries confined pretty much most of the day to their homes. They might be living in situations where there's family violence or very disrupted family relationships going on where they don't feel particularly safe. They may be dealing with very ill people, they may be feeling very unwell themselves if they've contracted the virus or have underlying chronic health conditions. So there's a lot of really, really important issues that people need to consider when they do when they are thinking about transitioning to using different methods. So the first one is there, that's privacy issues when conducting fieldwork in shared household spaces. That is a kind of it's a new issue really, that we haven't really had to think through as much before. The fact that people are now just stuck in their homes, often with family members all around them. It's very hard for them to do much that is private these days in that context. There's digital data privacy issues. So when we are going online and generating data from people, and asking them to generate data for us online. If you are in the European context, there's a GDPR issues to consider, but depending on the country that you live in, there may well be other regulations in your country specific legal context that you need to consider. So that's something that needs to be really front of mind as well. And thirdly, this is something that we had to do. We had to put in a revised ethics application to our Human Research Ethics Committee, and most of you will have committees like that at your university. And we had to ask for our protocol to be modified to make it online or using digital technology. So what we decided in the end to do with our fieldwork is that we're going to ask participants to use their own smartphones and walk around their house videoing their house as we're talking to them in real time via an app on the phone. That's what we're going to do, but of course we had to make sure that that would be approved by our ethics committee before we could go ahead and start doing that. Next slide, please. I thought I would list here the books that have already been listed in the Google Doc on innovative and creative methods, because some of these are, well, in fact, most of them are actually listed. Some people have added a couple more, but these are really great books that give really good sort of introductory overviews of how to do innovative and creative methods, which arts-based methods, for example, design-based methods, doing sensory, ethnography, material methods. All of those books I have found really useful for my own research in the past, and I really would recommend them to you if you can find them in your libraries. In particular, they may already have at least a few of those in your university libraries. So they're really great resources, and I commend them to you if you want to follow up on doing some really sort of different approaches to your research. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my last slide, and I put the link there to the Google Doc, Doing Fieldwork in a Pandemic. So you can either look at it later, you might like to click on it now, because what I'm going to do is the sort of guided tour of the document, and I'm just going to go through it and just highlight some of the content that people have added to this shared resource. It's not necessary that you need to click on it now, but totally up to you, but I recommend that you might click on it. Yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, if you can do it, yeah, we may as well do that, and everyone can see it as I'm talking through it. Yes,
I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm trying. Oops. Do I need permission?
Okay, well, while you're doing that, I'll just start it off. If you just maybe Google it, Stacey, it'll come up.
Get into it.
Just Google Doing Fieldwork in a Pandemic.
Okay. What's the best Google? Sorry.
Just have to go onto my email to give you that. If you just, because I have actually closed it for this webinar because I didn't want people adding stuff in real time. I was trying to talk through the document. If you, yeah, just if anyone could just Google Doing Fieldwork in a Pandemic, and you should be able to see it.
Oh, go ahead then.
At least, even if you can't add to it. Okay, so yes, I begin with just a little bit of a preamble. I do ask people to add their ideas below when it is open again. You'll be able to do that. I've also mentioned on the first page of the Google Doc that I curate a community Facebook page called Innovative Social Research Methods, and some of you may be interested if you do use Facebook. It's a community page. You can join up. And it's a lively community page where people share what they're doing, links to resources and so on. So that can be another resource that people might be interested in participating in and joining up to. And I've also added another document that I wrote 3 days ago, which is for some ideas about social research for a COVID and post-COVID world, and some ideas I had for an initial research agenda. I mean, I think realistically, every social researcher, any research we do from now on will actually be in the context of COVID, because it doesn't really matter what topic you are researching. Everything in our lives has changed, not just health related, but economic, social relationships and so on, work, education, everything has changed. So I really do think we all need to be thinking about what is going to be the effect of, the social impact of COVID on our participants, because we are all living through this moment. This moment will be a long moment. We are all adjusting, and everything in our life has changed. So really, we are actually all COVID researchers now, I would argue. But for those people who want to focus specifically on people's experiences of living in a COVID world, I have listed there on the first page a research agenda, which is available for open access on the Medium blogging website. Now, next on the Google Docs is a table of contents. So if you click on the links there, they'll take you straight to each section. And then we get into the actual content. So we have photo, video, voice elicitation, which is a method that involves asking research participants to use a camera or voice recording app. So they can take photos for themselves, they can make voice memos, they can take videos, and that's what I was describing in terms of what we're deciding to do with our ethnographic fieldwork. And you can either let them do that and then they can send you the materials, or you can talk to them in real time if you've also got a messaging app or a video conferencing app happening at the same time. We have diaries and journaling. I've mentioned paper diaries, but of course there are lots of apps or online platforms that can be used, or even just Word documents can be used and then sent by email for people to write about their everyday experiences. As it says in the Google Docs, you can also use the diaries as a prompt and talk to people about what they've written in the diaries. So it can be not only a form of content that they create, but also a prompt for interviews and further research into their everyday experiences. And I should mention too that in the doc I did ask people to add references. So there are for each method a list of references that can be followed up for people who want to learn more and see how other people have used these methods. Reenactment videos is where you actually ask people to go through a particular routine at a time of the day when they might not otherwise do that exercise or activity. Again, you can ask people to do it for themselves and then collect the video later and maybe sit down and talk, or not sit down these days, talk to them via digital medium about what happened in the videos. And the next section is about using wearable cameras. So in a project I was involved in, we actually used action cameras, very small GoPro cameras, to look at people's cycling trips, and we were interested in how they were using self-tracking devices as part of their cycling trip, and we got them to wear a GoPro camera on the front of their helmet, their cycling helmet. And so we had the sort of cyclist's eye view of their trip. We asked them to record one of their trips, and then we used that video to talk to them about what they were doing, what they were thinking, what they were feeling, whether they were checking their self-tracking device as they were riding or while they were stopped at a traffic light, and so on. So that actually was quite an interesting and generative approach that we used, using that kind of small action camera. Epistolary interviews is the next section. That's where I haven't tried this myself, but the person who added in this information talks about them as asynchronous one-to-one interviews mediated by technology. So it means that people have got time over a period of time, not asking all the questions at one time. You are probably using some kind of platform or maybe just email or Word documents to go back and forth with your questions and answers. So it gives people a little bit more time to answer your questions and for the interviewer to build up a relationship with the interviewee. Then there's online discussion platforms. I have used those in the past. So I've used a sort of research company, market research company, and they can do a customized platform where you can put in your, they do it for you, they put in your interview questions and then people join in and either answer the questions themselves, or there can actually be group chat type discussion group where they can see other participants' answers and sort of respond to other participants. It's up to you whether you want to do it that way as well. And what I like about that kind of format is that you as the researcher can actually see in real time what people are typing in, and you can probe them as well if you want to online. It's all happening online as people are typing in their answers, and it's kind of great too because you don't have to transcribe their answers. So that's worked quite well in a number of projects I've used. Cultural mobile probes. I talked about cultural probes before. They are when you give a set of kits of materials that you leave with research participants to complete in their own time, and once completed they can be sent back to the researchers either through snail mail or through email. And traditionally these materials are analogue, so they are paper cards or they are little things that they make. But you can actually also ask them to and send the probes via mobile phones and get responses back, so photos that you might ask people to take or little tasks you ask them to do using online technologies. Again, they can work really well to inspire discussion. The story completion method is a method I've used where you give people a story, what's called a story stem, a beginning of a story about a hypothetical person usually, and then you ask people to complete the story. You can do that using traditional writing materials, pen and paper, or you can actually do it in an online survey type of context. I've used SurveyMonkey to do it as well. You provide the story stems and then people just type in an open text box the answers to the story, so that can work quite well as well. App-based methods, so these are methods that are use smartphone apps to get in touch with participants for real-time research, so they can send little
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to let you know, let people know that we are aware that you can't see the Google Doc that Deborah's talking about, but you will be able to have access to it, I believe, after. Oh, yeah. So I'm just letting people know that we know they can't see the Google Doc right now, but that there will be access to it after the webinar, and that people are just asking they can't see it, so they wanted to understand why they couldn't see the Google Doc. And if you have any questions, there is a question area in the GoToWebinar in the menu,
have a very
so you can type in
look
questions.
And can view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've just checked the settings of the Google Doc, and I've made sure that it's now.
Also, you can get the slides.
Can view.
Sorry.
So hopefully people can.
Okay.
Hopefully people can view it at least, even if they can't access it now.
Yeah, that's okay. And
because I have set the settings to view.
Yeah. So, and also just let people know we have the. Okay. Oh well. Well, after we can do that. Deborah, do you want to take some questions?
You don't want me to continue going through some of the methods? I haven't kind of gone through all the methods yet. Do you want me to continue doing that, or
if you want
answer
to,
questions?
fine.
I should just add that
okay, so if you want to
not an
finish the
expert on all
methods,
the
and then we'll
methods.
take questions.
Yeah. So what I'm basically doing is just saying what methods are listed there. So I was talking about, I should also mention too that you can, with the Google Docs, of course, once you do get access and you can see it, and I really don't know why, so I have tried to make it available for people, anyone on the internet can find and view it now, says, so hopefully you can view it. You can actually download the document as a PDF, the Google Doc, or as a Word document. So that's something that people might like to do so they can save it as a resource. And that, I guess that could also be added, in fact, to the webinar materials as well, the PDF of the whole document. Stacey.
Yep, I was able to open the document.
Okay, looks like you've got access. Excellent. Well, we're down to app-based methods now. But yes, as I said, you can anyone can download this resource as a PDF or a Word document for your own if you just want to keep it. Okay, so app-based methods, yes, great, thanks. So I'm just moving down now to using Facebook groups. Some people have used those groups. I haven't actually done that as a research tool. What I do though is, I mentioned the Innovative Social Research Group. I actually find that Facebook groups can be really great as a sort of groups of researchers who are interested in the same kind of topic to share information and to chat together as well. So it's a great way to also share research ideas as well as using Facebook groups as a way of generating materials for your own research. Some people have actually added in abstracts from their own work. There's one interesting one there that talks about using a secret Facebook group. So if people are worried about using Facebook groups for research, you know, when they're too public and people can see what other people post, if you make your own secret Facebook group, then that sort of deals with that problem. It keeps it very private to the people who are only in the group. Then there's some information about using Google Microsoft Forms for data collection. Then there's a bit of discussion there about ethics, which I mentioned earlier in this talk. Have a look at that. I have actually put in some links to, and other people have also added some links. So there's the Association of Internet Researchers document, which is an excellent document for discussing the complex issues around using born digital research and also using digital platforms for generating new research. So check that out. It's kind of the gold standard in relation to digital research methods. There's also the ASA ethics guidelines added in there, and there's a few materials there about GDPR issues. Then there's a list of books on innovative creative methods that I have in the PowerPoint. Then there's some sections on autoethnography and geoethnography, netography. It's interesting that some people have also actually added some curriculum materials, which I think is great. So for people looking for what to be teaching your students, that some people have added that kind of material. Then there's a section on digital methods and quali-quant analysis, which is very much about the born digital materials that people could use. There's a section on using YouTube and online video for teaching observational studies, and also using YouTube just as a source of material for getting insights into people's everyday lives. There's a section on using podcasts to study culture. Big Brother style observations, which is interesting. That talks about, with people's permission, of course, putting a camera somewhere in a spot that they use and turning it on and off at agreed times to just sort of document their practices and interactions. And then there's one about experimenting with online live action role play, which is, I don't know anything about, but it looks like an interesting method. I've also put in the link to the LSE Digital Ethnography Collective reading list. So that itself has a huge, that was also a crowdsourced reading list. That has a huge number of really useful material on actual doing digital ethnography specifically. So check that out if you're interested in that. Then there's content on arts-based project combined with Skype interviews. So that gets back to using your creative prompts, but then using interviews to talk to people about what they've created. Creating social media platforms, groups similar to the Facebook. Someone's talking about using Reddit as well for that. Then there's the really interesting project talked about uses lots of different methods: online surveys, virtual interviews, and social media screenshots. So there's quite a lot of information about that very complex but very interesting project. There's digital mapping and geospatial technologies, live streaming apps, which many of us are using now for meetings, but can be used for research. Photojournalism and documentary photography, so using this idea of how to document everyday life of people using that kind of approach. Then there's another interesting curriculum on studying Europe online. And finally, a really useful sort of hands-on approach to how to actually do online interviews, what the sort of things you need to be looking out for and be careful of, and how to make them work. So that's a really great resource as well. And that's the end of the resource. So again, I emphasize that I'm not an expert in every single one of these. I've used some of them myself, but a lot of this material have been added by other people, but certainly happy to answer some questions if I can.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. That was great. I mean, the document's a great resource for people, so thank you for putting it together and then people adding to it. So I just want to let people know you can ask questions in the question area, and we do have the handout, Deborah's PowerPoint that's in handouts in the menu. So if you go to the orange arrow with the white, orange box with a white arrow, you click on the white arrow, that'll open up the menu for GoToWebinar, and then you'll see the area for handouts and where you can ask questions. So I'll just read this question to you, Deborah. I know we have a time lag a little, but so I'll start with the question. What if you are working among refugees? These are people who have already experienced a great deal of trauma in their lives. I'm having trouble imagining going digital with people with whom it's imperative to build trust. Any suggestions?
Well, that gets back to some of the issues I was talking about when talking about ethics. So absolutely, there are going to be very, very, very highly sensitive situations where sometimes it's difficult to imagine how a method that's not face-to-face can build that kind of trust that you absolutely would need in those kinds of sensitive situations. So, you know, but if you can't do face-to-face, then I guess you do have to think about what else might achieve that level of trust. It might be talking to people just on the phone to begin with, maybe just to build up a relationship by phone, which is a fairly low-tech way of doing things. It might be using that asynchronous kind of interview style where you might just, even by phone again, ask people a few questions over a few days rather than burdening them with too much that they need to be talking to you about. It may just be involve lots of preliminary relationship building to build that trust via phone calls, Skype, you know, a face-to-face situation where you can actually see each other's faces. I mean, that's all I can really think of. But I mean, if you don't have any alternative, then maybe just really working slowly to build up that trust is, rather than diving right in, is the only way to go about it.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Is the story completion method somewhat similar to vignettes? Asking this as a researcher in sensitive context of gender-based violence.
The story completion method, actually, it's interesting. It has been mostly used in social psychology for researching very sensitive or personal, highly personal topics, because what's good about it is you are usually using a hypothetical third person. You know, you start with someone's name. You know, John is concerned that whatever. You know, I've done it with story stubs involving people who might be worried they have a sexually transmissible disease, for example, but it's about a hypothetical third person. So the beauty of using story completion is that you are asking people to respond to that person's dilemma, which is not themselves. But of course, in doing so, in responding to their dilemma and completing that person's story arc, they are revealing something about their own understandings and feelings. That, of course, they have to, because they're building on their own life experience to respond to the story. So it actually has been used a lot for that kind of very sensitive, for things like LGBTQI issues, for very personal kind of sexual related behaviour, for mental health topics. So it actually works really well for those highly sensitive topics.
Great, thank you. Oh, excuse me, here's another question. Do you have any specific tips on the peculiar techniques on online key informant interviews?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
Sorry. Do you have any specific tips on the specific techniques for online key informant interviews?
No, I don't really have any specific tips for that.
Okay.
No,
Sorry, no problem.
but maybe that person might get some inspiration from looking through the document. That might help them think through that. I haven't done that myself, that kind of research myself.
Okay, no problem. Just looking at. So people have access to the document, so that's great. For new research conducted from 2020, is there any additional implications that researchers need to keep in mind when proposing research methods and ethical implications?
Yes, and I refer back to what I've already said about ethics. And I think also what I kind of originally said when I was talking about my own research project involving home visits. So as I said at that time, when I was talking about that we all absolutely need to be thinking about what the right time is of actually either resuming a project or starting a new one. We need to, and I say this in the document as well, actually, I talk about effective atmospheres. We need to be understanding what the effective atmospheres are of people's life worlds right now, and when would be the right time to actually be going back into doing applied research, which involves talking to people, because most people, I think, around the world are feeling pretty traumatized and kind of very thrown by the challenges we're all facing right now, very worried and anxious, and wondering just what will be happening with their lives. So we all as individual researchers need to kind of read the room, and you know, and there's safety issues for ourselves as well. We need to protect our own well-being. Maybe now's not the time to be launching into a new project. Maybe we need to be pausing for our own purposes and just thinking carefully and not rushing into anything as well. So there's those two sort of different timeframes. There's timeframes about our own readiness to be conducting research, and there's the timeframe that we need to consider of our research participants and at what point they may be ready.
Great, thank you. Here's a question. I'm having to switch from in-person interviews with children at school to phone interviews at home. I don't think we can guarantee privacy when they are using their parents' phones. Can we ask them to find a private space? Do we have language language recommendations for the IRB?
Yeah, I'm not sure what age that person's talking about, because it will obviously also depend on the age of the child. I would imagine that there'd be very different issues for, say, under 12-year-olds, say, compared with teenagers. So I have to be a bit general, I guess. But yeah, I mean, there's always researching with children, of course, is always a very difficult area in many ways, because yes, you have to acknowledge. Well, I mean, for a start, you usually have to get parental permission anyway, so the parents have to know about it, and they have to agree to it. And if you're researching with children, and then of course you have to get the child's consent, and to ensure that the child understand at whatever age level they're at, that they understand what consent means. And yes, in terms of the situation we're now in, where we're all sort of confined to home, that, yeah, absolutely, that is a really difficult issue. There's going to be some children who may not have access to their own digital device, who may not even have a physical space where they can talk on a digital device or communicate otherwise on a digital device without some other family member being around. And you know, that will be highly variable even within the one research setting, within the one town or city or suburb even, I would have thought. So I think if you're talking to your IRB or ethics committee people, if you're doing your research your applications for approval, then I think one important thing to do would be just to make sure they know that you're aware of all those issues, and I know our ethics committee, they want a lot of detail from us. And I would have thought the more you can show you've thought through these issues and what solutions you might have if there are particular difficulties for particular groups of people, that the more likely it is that they will understand that you know what those issues are.
Great, thank you. So here's a question. Virtually all methods discussed seem to be geared toward eliciting information from individual respondents asynchronously. What about those of us who rely on focus groups and observing interactions between respondents? Anything besides Zoom you could recommend?
Well, Facebook groups, people can see each other's comments in a Facebook group. If it's a closed Facebook group, you can make sure that it's only people who you have invited to take part in group discussions. But from what I haven't used that myself, but from what I read from other people's experiences, that can be a really good way of generating discussion within a group setting. And I did mention the online discussion platform that I myself have used, where you can actually do a focus group. You can let people see other people's, again, it's only people you've invited to that platform, similar to the closed Facebook group, and you can make it that so that other participants can see each other's responses to the prompts or the questions. So that would be another way to do that kind of group discussion.
Great, thanks. I'm going just a few more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Is there any discussion in the document of innovative strategies for how to pay financial compensation to participants when you cannot meet with them face-to-face, for example, in research with marginalized groups, where receiving this compensation can be very important in the context of their participation?
Yes, well, I mean, I personally think it is good to compensate people because you're asking for their time, and they should be compensated, particularly if they are low income. What I usually use is a gift card from a major kind of retail outlet, rather than, say, cash. So you can send, these days, of course, you can do online vouchers for gift cards, or you can even send them in the snail mail. People can get mail, an exciting gift card in the mail.
Excellent. Let's just take, so thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to get one more. Since face-to-face interviews can't be conducted at the moment, however, there are some sensitive topics such as depression or anxiety, and the study involves participants to share their experiences. What are the other possible methods of qualitative research which can be adapted?
Well, that's a big question.
Well, a good one to end on, maybe.
You know, I don't necessarily have the answer to every person's problem. Look, I would just say to that person, just go and read. They may not have had a chance to go through the document in detail, the Google Docs document. There are lots of solutions there. And there may well be others that other people will add in future times when I open it up again for editing, because it is a crowdsourced document. It's absolutely meant to be there for people to add their fabulous ideas. So to begin with, have a look through what's already there, and keep up to date with future content that might be added.
Great. So we have a lot of people saying thank you, and they now have access to the resources, so that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint quickly, and just remind people that keep the conversation going after by going to hashtag NVivo chat and ask your questions and help each other also with information. We do have more webinars coming up. So we have next week, When the Field is Online, Qualitative Data Collection with Dr. Janet Salmons. And then also April 15th, Teaching Qualitative Methods Online with Dr. Christina Silver, Sarah Bollock, and Shireen Snelson. And so if you're teaching online or teaching qualitative methods, this might be a good resource for you. And you just go to our website under resources and live webinars. The NVivo community, feel free to join, and you'll learn more about these type of events like the webinar we're having today and our other webinar series, plus some upcoming podcasts and other resources to help researchers. We're really trying to create a community of practice with qualitative and mixed methods researchers to connect you with each other. And then these are just some of the processes we have with NVivo to help you through your research process. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to see the different products we now that really go from collecting data to transcribing to analyzing to help you collaborate and then to enhance your publication. And at the end, I just want to say thank you to Deborah. That was really informative, and that document is just a great resource for people. And we hope to continue the conversation after. Would you like to say any parting words, Deborah?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, thanks for inviting me to talk, and thank you to everyone who's already contributed to the Google Docs document. It's been really great working with everyone digitally and online in that way. People responded really well, and thanks to everyone who's listened in today.
Mm-hmm. And we did record this, so you'll get a recording 24 hours after the webinar. You'll get it in an email. So thank you very much. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great, please be safe and healthy.